It's November 24th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Qatar's foreign ministry announced a 4-day Israel-Hamas ceasefire will begin at 7 a.m. local time on Friday. The first group of 13 hostages held by Hamas is set to be freed at 4 p.m. that day, with a total of 39 Palestinian prisoners also released as part of the deal. After wrapping up his state visit to the United Kingdom, President Yoon is now in Paris to make his last pitch to tout Busan as the host of the World Expo in 2030. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says having a military reconnaissance satellite is a proud exercise of the right to self-defense that cannot be compromised, celebrating the regime's successful first spy satellite launch. After bidding farewell to Charles III in London, President Yoon is once again in Paris to promote South Korea's efforts to win the bid to host the 2030 World Expo in its port city of Busan. The vote is just days away now. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
The World Expo in Busan would be a place where culture, technology and ideas meet and create synergy between countries. That's according to President Yoon on Thursday, addressing representatives of the Bureau International Day Expositions in Paris, as he pushed for South Korea to host the 2030 edition of the exhibition. The international fair, which began with London's Great Exhibition in 1851, is held every 5 years to showcase humanity's advances in science, industry and culture as mirrors of their time, and also set out visions for the future.
It's the second time this year that the South Korean president has visited the French capital, where the organising body of the World Expo is located. It is here in Paris, where the final vote for the host city will be held on Tuesday.
Busan, Riyadh and Rome are in the running to host the World Expo that will run from May to October in 2030, with representatives of 182 BIE member states casting a secret vote. At a banquet held to promote Busan's bid on Thursday, Yoon greeted Paris-based diplomats and BIE delegates and highlighted the growing interest in Korean culture, including food, music and movies, among people around the world. He said with the appeal of Korea and Busan's cultural assets, the exhibition in 2030 would promote understanding and exchanges of different cultures, technologies and ideas as an expo of solidarity.
Korea is a country of future of technology, innovation, very dynamic, very attractive in terms of culture. And one way to leverage on this is to leverage on tangible things, which means foreign policy, working on cooperation for existing projects, trade, but it's also intangible. Intangible means culture, and means potential in science innovation. And actually the intangible aspect is the most attractive feature of Korea in Europe and many countries these days.
Under the theme of transforming our world, navigating towards a better future, Busan aims to become a solution platform to address common challenges facing humanity by promoting global solidarity and cooperation for development and prosperity. The theme is rooted in South Korea's history of transformation, from the ashes of the 1950 to 53 Korean War to become a tech and cultural powerhouse. During his 3-day stay in Paris, Yoon will hold more BIE-related engagements, leading efforts across government and the private sector, including the nation's top conglomerates like Samsung, LG and Lotte. The top office has hinted that the final presentation for Busan will be delivered by an influential figure in the international community. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Paris.
Now, this is President Yoon's second time in Paris to meet with BIE representatives. This was a journey that started with his inauguration, with the campaign at the core of his diplomatic agenda. Our Kim Do-young gives us the highlights of the president's efforts.
105 key figures from 91 countries met during 12 overseas trips and one nosebleed. That's the sum of President Yoon Suk-yeol's all-out effort to host the World Expo 2030 in Busan, as the campaign to host the expo comes to an end in Paris next Tuesday. For him, it is an opportunity for South Korea to become a true leader in the global community while giving Busan an opportunity to develop further, a big win both domestically and internationally. In fact, it only took 20 days from his inauguration to kick things off as he chaired the first committee meeting on the bid.
우리가 가진 모든 역량을 결집해야 합니다. 정부의 교섭 사절단 구성과 파견 계획을 조속히 마련해야 합니다.
Then things really started to pick up pace as he went on overseas trips. NATO in June 2022 was his first foreign multilateral trip where he promoted Busan during his 10 sideline summits.
제가 나토에 가서도 그 양자 회담을 하면서 그 지지를 호소할 때 여러 그 귀국의 그 상품을 전 세계에 그 보여주는 데 있어서 대한민국만큼 그 확실하게 그 광고를 해줄 수 있는 그런 인프라를 갖춘 경쟁국은 없다. 그런 점을 강조를 해왔고.
As he continued to push for Busan during overseas trips, a chance came to bring the focus back home as officials from the Bureau International des Expositions Inquiry Mission visited Korea to assess Busan. President Yoon welcomed the representatives and emphasized the unity of South Korean people behind the Busan bid.
미래 세대가 더 나은 세상을 꿈꾸고 세계 시민이 더 나은 미래를 꿈꿀 수 있도록 박람회 유치 활동을 진심을 다해 펼쳐가고 있습니다.
In June, he himself was part of the presenters at the BIE General Assembly along with K-pop star Psy and other prominent figures. This is something the other contenders, Saudi Arabia and Italy, did not do, showing the unity from the top of the government to each citizen was the exact edge Busan offered.
We will make it the best World Expo of all time. Central and local governments, companies and citizens, all political parties, and more than 7.5 million overseas Koreans are truly united in their wish for the Busan Expo.
The true highlight was his trip to New York for the UN General Assembly in September. In a span of 5 days, he had 41 sideline bilateral summits with other leaders in town. All this as he made a UN address urging the closing of division in the world, saying the Busan Expo 2030 was perfect for that.
그동안 이루어낸 성장과 발전의 경험을 국제사회와 널리 공유함으로써 대한민국이 국제사회로부터 받은 도움을 돌려드리고자 합니다.
It was during a cabinet meeting after this trip, according to reports, that the president suffered a nosebleed due to fatigue. But it was also the pressure, as amid extreme political and social divide in the country, the Busan Expo is one thing that's wanted by both sides of the aisle. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
More than a dozen international human rights groups have jointly called for voters for the 2030 World Expo to vote against Saudi Arabia's bid due to the country's poor human rights record. In an open letter to the BIE, the World Expo organizer, 15 rights groups, including Democracy for the Arab World Now, European Saudi Organization for Human Rights, and Freedom House and the Human Rights Foundation said BIE member states should vote against Saudi Arabia's candidacy during the voting next week. The group said Saudi Arabia routinely commits human rights abuses, such as arbitrary detention, target women's rights activists, and violation of freedom of expression, and that hosting the expo will serve as a cover-up for systematic human rights abuses. Saudi Arabia's capital city Riyadh is in a three-way race against Busan and Rome to host the expo. So President Yoon is drumming up support for South Korea's bid to host G2030 World Expo by making a final pitch in Paris, where the final vote for the host takes place. Let's turn to Philip Mesmer for more this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. President Yoon is going for that last push to make Busan the host of the 2030 World Expo. Now, his stop in Paris itself will show how eager and ambitious Korea is, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, as explained in the previous reporting you showed, he met people from 91 countries to try to convince them to support the Busan candidacy. So it seems that it's a big project for him. He would like to get it, to bring the expo to Busan. You should also note that the South Korean Foreign Minister Park Jin was in Paris at the beginning of November. He gave an interview to Le Monde newspaper, and he explained also the position for Busan. So I think not only for the President Yoon, but also for the South Korean government, it's a very important project.
Right, the whole diplomatic delegation is doing their best. On top of that, an economic delegation, including Samsung chairman Lee Jae-yong, is once again tagging along with the president. How does their presence help actually make a difference then?
I think it's the big delegation is important because there are big conglomerates that are worldwide companies that have influence in economic, but also in a way in some cultural aspect of the business. So they are supporting from the beginning the Busan candidacy. So it's very important that they are there with the president to try to convince the office of Expo to choose Busan. So yeah, I think it's significant and very important to have the business community with the president. It also shows that how Korea is mobilized to support this project.
Right. And I do have to admit, Philip, South Korea was a little behind in joining the race to host the 2030 edition compared to its major rival, Saudi Arabia. Now, what would you say that Korea has done well so far to really showcase itself as a potential host?
I think South Korea did well in promoting the candidacy. I mean, I was in Paris in September and I saw some advertisement for the Busan 2030. So I think, South Korea, with the government, with the help of business community, made lots of advertisement promotion to get it. So it's difficult to say that something is missing to get it. So I don't know how the people will vote next week, but I think they did as much as they could.
Definitely. We are less than a week away from the final vote to choose the host of the 2030 edition. And with the president in Paris with a group of business leaders, what final push do you think there should be so that Busan actually does become the host?
It's difficult to say because I think negotiations are going on I've been going on for months now, so it's difficult just 4 days before. But I think, insisting on the interest of having this expo in Busan, which is a very nice city on the sea and very well located geographically speaking, with a very interesting history, the rebuilding after the Korean War. And it's also a city with lots of industries that have an impact worldwide. I think insisting on all of that and also on the cultural aspect of things, that could maybe convince some countries to change their mind, maybe, I don't know.
Right. All right. Thanks so much for your time and insight this morning. We appreciate it, Philip.
Thank you very much.
Israel and Hamas are set to begin a 4-day ceasefire on Friday, which will also see hostages released in exchange for Palestinians detained in Israel. However, Israel has made it clear it will resume operations when the truce expires. Our Shin Se-byuk has more.
Israel and Hamas are set to begin a 4-day truce on Friday.
The beginning of the pause will be 7 a.m. Friday, the 24th of November, and it will last, of course, as agreed, for 4 days.
This means a comprehensive ceasefire in the war-torn Gaza Strip, marking a brief respite from the war that began after Hamas launched attacks on Israel on October 7th. Also happening at the beginning of the truce, according to Qatari mediators, is the release of the first batch of hostages. 13 Israeli women and child hostages will be released at around 4 p.m. on Friday. The two sides also have agreed to release a total of 50 hostages out of some 240 kidnapped within the 4 days. In return, Israel will free 150 Palestinians currently being held in prison. Humanitarian aid will also start flowing into the Gaza Strip. According to officials in Gaza, since the October 7th attack, nearly 15,000 people have died in Gaza, including over 6,000 children, while some 36,000 people have been injured. And the death toll could be even larger as authorities in Gaza pointed to difficulties in retrieving bodies as the war escalated. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the war will continue after the pause.
We'll continue with our war aims, namely to eradicate Hamas.
Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, speaking to Israeli Navy troops on Thursday, also vowed that Israel would resume, quote, intense fighting after the, quote, short truce. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said having a military reconnaissance satellite is a proud exercise of the right to self-defense that cannot be compromised. According to the North state-run media on Friday, Kim made the comments during a visit to the National Aerospace Development Administration on Thursday, where he praised scientists, engineers, and executives who led the successful launch of its first spy satellite. Kim added that the successful launch of the military reconnaissance satellite has greatly improved the regime's war deterrence capabilities. North Korea on Tuesday successfully launched a new type carrier rocket Cheonrima-1, loaded with the reconnaissance satellite Manrikyung-1. A South Korean High Court overturned a lower court 2021 ruling on Thursday and ordered the Japanese government to compensate the victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery. The Seoul High Court ordered Japan to pay 200 million Korean won, or about $150,000 to each of the 16 victims. It said Tokyo must pay reasonable compensation as the country's, quote, illegal acts are recognized when mobilizing the so-called comfort women on the Korean peninsula at the time, meaning during World War II. Back in 2021, the Seoul Central District Court dismissed a case citing sovereign immunity, a concept under customary international law that allows a state to be immune from civil suits in foreign courts.
Good morning. I'm Kim Ji-young. We now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Ecuador, where the youngest president-elect in the country's history was sworn in as president on Thursday. The 35-year-old Daniel Noboa, a millionaire heir to a banana trade empire and an unexperienced politician, is set to serve only 18 months in his role, the remaining term of his predecessor Guillermo Lasso. In his inauguration speech, Noboa vowed to tackle the country's ongoing issue of violence and boost the economy by creating jobs. Once regarded as one of the safest countries in South America, Ecuador in recent years has seen an extreme surge of violence driven by rival drug trafficking groups. According to local authorities, drug-related violence has been behind some 3,600 murders so far this year. Following the August murder of anti-corruption advocate, presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio, there were calls in the country for immediate action. An early election was held in October as Ecuador's previous president dissolved the country's legislature to dodge an impeachment vote back in May. Now moving over to Pakistan, where a government decision to charge Afghan refugees leaving Pakistan for Western countries under resettlement schemes has been slammed. UN officials and Western diplomats called $830 fee shocking and frustrating. The move comes after Pakistan announced a major deportation scheme for undocumented foreigners, including refugees, with November 1st set as a deadline for about 1.7 million unregistered Afghan migrants to leave the country. The US government has announced plans to resettle around 25,000 Afghans, while the UK will provide refuge for up to 20,000 in the coming years. Many of the Afghani refugees fled to Pakistan following the Taliban takeover in 2021. Now moving over to Ireland, where police quelled rioting in the capital Dublin on Thursday night, which followed a stabbing incident earlier the same day. Rioters attacked police and burned police cars and trams and caused damage to stores in the city centre, with looting also reported. While the main cause of the disturbance is unclear, police have blamed the riots on right-wing ideology following a knife attack on Parnell Square East in Dublin city centre, which left a 5-year-old girl and a woman in her 30s seriously injured. Police commented that the suspect is a man in his 40s who was also seriously injured. Now moving on to our final story, the Turkish central bank announced on Thursday another interest rate hike, which sets its policy rate at 40%. The new interest rate sees an increase of 5 percentage points from the previous policy rate, as the Turkish Central Finance Agency aims to curb the double-figure inflation, which came in at 61.36% last month. This interest rate hike is 6th in a row by the central bank. Interest rates were just 8.5% in 2018.
Good morning. I'm sure I wasn't the only one thinking I should have worn more layers before heading outside this morning. There has been a huge drop in ratings overnight, with cold wave alerts issued across much of Korea. An icy wind is making things even tougher for morning commuters. Feels like temperatures are below -5 degrees here in Seoul. A strong wind advisory is also issued for coast regions, dragging down the feels like temperatures even further. And especially those in the east of Gangwon-do province will have the toughest morning, with wind and dry alerts and a cold wave warning issued. Making matters tougher is snow. Chungcheong, Namdo, Jeollado, and Jeju could see 1 to 3 centimeters of snow through late this afternoon. Please be careful out on the roads today. Afternoon highs could be about 15 degrees lower than Thursday in most places. Seoul seeing highs of just 2 degrees, and that sharp wind will make you feel colder than these numbers. Tomorrow morning looks to be even colder, and it's going to stay bitterly cold through the weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next week for a Monday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.